Okay.
All right, we're recording. Thank you, Kelly. Before we get started, hi, my name is Brian Waters. I'm an account executive here. If you're not familiar with Bales, I'd like to take a second to tell you a little bit about us. We have been in the N4 ecosystem for over 26 years. We are entirely N4 focused. We do nothing but N4 implementations, upgrades, and managed services. We support all aspects of the technology, including S3, Landmark, and Cloud Suite, including HCM, finance, and supply chain. In fact, we have been recognized and giving partner awards in 8 out of the last 10 years. Our consultants bring 15 plus years of consulting experience in this space in the equivalent and professional experience. Some were former benefit managers, compensation managers, directors of supply chain, as well as former controllers and CFOs. Exciting news for the N4 community. Earlier this year, Bales became part of Nordic, an industry-leading healthcare consulting firm. Bales will operate as a wholly owned subsidiary and continue to be led by Jamie Bales. Nordic will provide us with resources to fund our growth, expand our business, and support our customers more effectively. For healthcare customers, it allows us to bring together Nordic's capabilities in the EHR space to provide a more holistic solution, including specific expertise in EHR and ERP integration. This combination will offer a best practice model to reduce implementation risks and leveraging the data from both systems to drive insights and outcomes. Again, thank you for joining today. Our presenters today are Kellie Gilbert, our Director of Service Delivery, and Niki Kimball, our HCM Practice Manager. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Good afternoon / morning, everyone. I'm Kellie Gilbert. I am going to be leading the presentation today with Niki Kimball assisting in the background. A quick disclaimer, provided this presentation is related to HR talent. It just says you should come to us with any other questions. All right, and there's Niki Kimball, the HCM Practice Manager, and myself, Kellie Gilbert. All right, our GHR Absence Management overview. What is absence management? It is a great tool for tracking, manage and track vacations, sick, leave of absences, and FMLA, time off requests. It's very flexible, very rule-based, and it's automated. Everybody loves automation. The more we can automate, the more we can focus on other areas. You can create absence plan based on rules and calculations that determine enrollment requirements, lengths of service, limits, how you're going to hit the GL, what's actually going to be printed in payroll. It's just a really great tool. So we have here's how the plan setup steps. You have your plan, like vacation, sick, holiday, and within that plan, you have your rules. And there are 6 rules that you have, but only 3 are required. The little asterisks form the ones that are required. You have your service rule, your accrual rule, service rule, your length of service, accrual rule, how you accrue your vacation, your usage rule, when you can actually take it, limit rule, how much you can have, balance rule is the payroll, you know, what do you want to decrement the balance and print on the check, and of course your GL rule, what you're posting your liabilities to general ledger. And the rules include tables, formulas, calculations, service codes, and reasons codes. And we'll get into that a little bit here. And by the way, if you do have a question, go ahead, Niki, go ahead.
And that's pretty much the same thing as what's in S3. If you're looking at GHR absence for an upgrade, right, to go up to GHR, and you're in S3, it's all the same plan basis, right? It's got the same core build. But yes, and on top of that, if you have a question at any point, go ahead and put it in the chat. I'll be watching that so you can I can get Kellie to answer it for you.
Or Niki can answer it herself, but we'll both answer it. How's that, Niki? So here's your basic absence management structure. Like I said, you have your plan type or your plan, and your eligibility group used to be called an employee group in S3. Now it's a custom group in GHR, but you get your eligibility group, who is allowed to be in that group, and then you go down to your plan. And within your plan, you have your rules. The great thing about absence management is I can utilize the stands if it's the same thing, or if my one group has, like in this example, my full-time salary has the same service rule as my full-time hourly, my part-time, but my union is using a different service rule, because for a good example for that would be my everybody, excluding my unions, is using my adjusted hire date, where my unions might be using my seniority date. So here's how you can share rules or have special rules for different groups of people. And the flexibility in this system is amazing. So we have plan types and categories. A plan type is the highest level. They hold configuration settings that are created underneath them. And again, for example, we give personal time off, holiday, vacation, so on and such, or sick. Plan categories are used to group plans for limit checking, balance transfer actions, and reporting. So a plan category is a bunch of different plan types put together. So here's your plan setup. Plans are used to find specific set of rules, right, to apply to specific eligibility group, right up here, and plan type. And each plan, specific set of rules, these will be used for several plans or if the same rules apply, like we said, we can share them. So plans and eligibility groups. When your eligibility groups are defined, you can start setting up the plan. The plan defines the version date or range of date that the plan is in effect. So a good point of that is we can then have one change. For example, I had accruing at 1 hour per pay period for the first 10 year, and then for my organization, then they came in and said, we need to revamp our vacation policy. As of August 1st, I get to earn 2 per pay period. So we can then just effective date that change to that rule, and the system knows to now to start using that rule. Pretty cool. So here are different plan rules. We have our service rule. So it defines the length of service for calculating. For example, you use your start date, adjust your start date, birth date, seniority date, all different kinds of dates in there.
And you can add 90 days or 3 months to that too if you need to, you know, they don't start accruing or they don't join the plan until later on, right? You have options.
Right, and I think we could do hours too, right?
Oh
right,
yeah,
Niki?
it can count hours, absolutely. Yep, in a certain pay, in a certain service class. Yeah.
Yeah, so as long as you have that service class put in there, you can actually say you have to work here 1,000 hours before you can start, you know, accruing vacation. So it's pretty cool. It's very robust. We also have our accrual and allotment rules. They're defined how they're calculated within a plan. Then my favorite, my usage rule, didn't it used to be the eligibility rule? Anyway,
yeah.
The usage rule sets the begin date that defines when I can take my accruals, allotments, and of course I want to take it right away because I think I need a vacation. And then we have our limit rules. They're used to define the totals, okay, and when they reset. In a lot of organizations, they like limit out at 240 hours up to 5 years, and let's say 300 hours, 5 years to 10 years, and 400 hours from 11 years to 20 years, and over 20 years, you just max out at 500 hours. So that's your limit rule defined.
Or they use it or lose it.
I was just going to say that, Niki. Thank you. No, go ahead. Tell them about the use it or lose it.
So if at the end of the calendar year or your anniversary year, you start your balance over, it drops to 0, you would use this limit rule in the same way to say on the anniversary, set the limit to 0, and that would drop the balance back.
Thanks, Niki. I love it, the use it or lose it rule. No, don't be. And I think we get onto processing a little bit later. There's a little note I want to tell you about that use it or lose it thing, because if you don't run it right, it gets all messed up. But anyway, balance rules define the usage service class or the payout service code and negative balance options for the service record. And everybody's, if you're from finance, general ledger rules, this comes important. They can't we had a little typo there, Niki. Create a general ledger liability and project accounting interfaces. So basically, it posts the liability of the vacation, the amount of dollars that you're liable. If everybody took vacation at the same time, which we know that would never happen, but that's the liability that's sitting out there, is everybody that has vacation is considered a liability, and the general ledger rules defines what gets posted. The rules tables, they define the amounts, percents, formula calculations, or dates that are used for each level of service, and if there's a calculation maximum. So when you look at this table here, this maximum is for that cycle, okay? It's not the maximum in the whole plan. That's on a limit table. So I just want to make sure we understand that the maximum here is the maximum that can be accrued for that cycle. So a lot of my organizations that I work with, and Niki, I think, you know, if you want to pipe in here, that's great, accrues so much per hour worked, up to a max of 4 hours per cycle. So this would be my amount of so much per hour worked, or my it'd be a calculation, with a maximum of like 4 hours per cycle. That's what you would put here, right, Niki?
Yep, yep, and it'll all be based on the service class. Yep.
Yes. So that's where this comes in here.
And some of these, can you go back to that for a second? Because so some of the examples we put in here, they're pretty specific. So the absence table here says PTO full-time, right? But this, if it's being used by multiple plans, you could put a more generic name for this. So you could say, you know, the 5-week accrual, or you could, you know, so it can be used but for these examples that we put in here, they're very specific. So if you are going to be using them for different plans or for different eligibility groups, then you can keep them generic. And that's what we've seen more people going towards.
Definitely. I know I've been doing this for a little bit of time, and before they made this absence management module, they had something called time accrual. And it was a challenge, to say the least, but everything had to be so specific because you couldn't share stuff. It took me a while to learn how to make my my short description, my long description to be generic enough to where I know what it was doing, but the ability to use it between different plans, because it could be the same for a sick or for a vacation or for a holiday plan. Right, Nick?
Yep, yep.
And then also, if you notice down here, this little from area, this is blank 226. So starting on the 20th, so that's 1 year. Or if you're biweekly, let me rephrase that. If you're in a biweekly payroll cycle, or biweekly, it doesn't have to be payroll, biweekly absence cycle, 0 to 26, we can get 1.54. 27 starts the next cycle, or their new calculation, because they've been here over a year, and they'll get 2.31. And then 52 would end that year, and 53 would start their next level of accruage. Is that a word? I think it is, at 3.07. So just so you know, it's always the next cycle that you want to put here in the from field. Make sense? I'm going to pretend everybody's nodding their heads yes.
Yep, sounds great.
Good. So now we're on to formulas. There is I think there's 3 different formulas that you can actually utilize within the absence management. You have your amount formula, which accrue a flat or calculated amounts that are based on the length of service. You have a ratio based on the types of hours worked in a given cycle. Or we have our date formulas, and that is if for calendar dates, right? Everybody's going to get Christmas and Christmas Eve off. So that's considered a date cycle. Those are utilized with organizations that have that set date, like no matter what, everybody's getting these days off. That's about the time I've utilized that date one. Have you utilized it much, Niki?
Yeah, no, just for the holidays. That's all I've seen it.
Yep. Calculations are used to define additional accrual computations. I absolutely use calculations quite often because a lot of my clients is so much per hour work times their FTE. So another one that we have listed here is that zero calculation. So remember when we said the use it or lose it plan? If you have a use it or lose it plan, you're going to need the zero calculation. Service codes, classes, and relationships. Okay, so your service code represents the type of hours that can be used in absence management, processing, and calculation. If you are utilizing payroll, your service code needs to be attached to your pay code, okay? If you're not utilizing payroll, then you just have your service code. And you group your service codes into service class. So a service class is used to group the service code for absence plan processing and reporting. And then you can have a relationship, and that ties a service class to a service code. So a service code can be tied to one or more many service classes. For example, I could have a PTO service class, and I'm going to use regular pay, overtime pay, what other type of pay, Niki, hourly, shift pay, maybe, I don't know. That's going to, all those grouped together, those service codes grouped together in that service class for a calculation. And or we also utilizes that for decrementing the employee's balances, right? So again, we'd have a PTO usage, and in there we'd have your vacation, your sick, if that's what you mapped them to. But that's just how that all works together. And service codes, as I mentioned earlier, are mapped to pay codes if you're utilizing Infor payroll.
And usually they're one-to-one, right? So you want to make sure that it gets complicated if you try and do it any other way, right?
Yep. Definitely. The only time I have seen that a little bit different, Niki, if I had the pay code by job code. I don't know if you've seen that before. I had to do that at a client. But the pay code was the same. It was just like a different shift diff on the job code. So that's when they sort of shared a service class. That's the one time, I think the only time I've seen it. Enrolling resources. When you check the automatic enrollment box, as soon as someone gets into that eligibility group, they'll automatically be enrolled into the plan. You can also manually enroll the resource to the absence plan or override plan parameters by resource plan or organization. And then my favorite, mass enrollment can be used to create or update absence plan records for plans that are not defined as automatic enrollment. So those are the 3 ways you can enroll an employee. Processing plans. So in the old S3, okay, let's go back to enrolling resources, sorry. For those of you that were in that have utilized S3 or know what I'm talking about, that's like your LP100 or LP101. So this actual processing, in GHR, everything runs by a process. And so this is very similar to the LP140 that you used to have in S3. But again, here is how you process a plan. Now, remember we mentioned that use it or lose it. So if you have one of those plans and you need to run the calculate carryover first and close and then run out processing. If you don't do that, it happens all in one step and you never get any hours accrued. So just a note to self, make sure you do that. And I've learned from experience that's why I know it's painful. When you process plans, you can create your absence transactions for the resources who's enrolled in that plan. It calculates the accruals according to the plan rules. It calculates allotments, again, according to the rules, applies your limits for ongoing balances, and again, your carryovers. So that's why you really need to run that carryover process first, and then run process all. Transfers accruals and allotments into eligible, processes absence event usage and transactions, any manual adjustments and updates, and it calculates any lost carryover according to the limit end date. So that's what that lovely process plan does. Again, same thing as the LP140. Now this is really cool. This is sort of like, again, referring back to those of you who know S3, this is like your LP00, where you can see where it is. So this is a process monitor. You go to Absence Management, Processing, Process Monitor, and you can see here it either says it's in progress or run. It says in process or complete. If it's blank, it's blank. If it's running, it's in process, and when it's done, you get this lovely little green check mark, which we love. So if you look at by organization, it shows the flags in a simple list, and just like listing out your process level, but this is doing your org units. And then when you're done, you can go to your plan processing details and see exactly what happened to that person. So here, Bob 14 here, he got his allotment, he transferred his allotment to available right here, and then he lost his carryover. That's not good. And then he got an allotment, then he lost his allotment because his ongoing limit exceeded. So this poor guy didn't get a lot. But as you can see, that's how it steps through the process, ins and outs and ins and outs and ins and outs. And then when you're done, you have to close the plans, just like your LP 197 and S3. We still need to close the plans here in absence in GHR. So again, it changes the transaction to a closed status instead of just process status. It updates the resource plan with a new balance and new dates, if applicable, and updates the transaction summary file with the transactions amounts being closed. And then there's a couple of different ways that you can view your employees in your absence product. There's the resource views, all employee plan data in one place by plan. So I can look at it just by the plan, right? Or this, we're looking at looking at it by resource, and it shows all of his dates, all the transactions, all the balances. So it's pretty cool. Here's key dates and balances. I can click on transactions and then the running available balance. So if you are not utilizing GHR payroll as of yet, and you're still utilizing S3 payroll, it does interact with S3 payroll, any other HR talent applications. It uses the HR talent organization, the resource number, the work assignment, the payment schedule, and pay code setup. It does use employee and manager space. It can share information with the benefits application for vacation, buy, and sell plans. It links time off requests to HR talent time records and absence service records, as well as creates absence service records from imported time records or approved time records from time entry. And then it kind of has some interfaces. There is the time import and export. If we're importing time records to create the service records, and it creating CSV files to export the time records from absence management service records. Balance and transactions, we can create CSV files to export balances from absence management to a generic or WFM format, and export general ledger transactions from absence management to go to a different GL system, if applicable. If you're utilizing everything of the Infor Cloud Suite products, such as Infor HR Talent or Global Finance, it is all seamlessly done, and it's really amazing. And Nikki, do we have any questions?
No, there's nothing in the chat. Quiet crowd today.
Well, because they're like, it's Friday, people, hurry up. All right, well, if you do have any questions, just put them in the chat for Nikki. I know if a couple of the clients on here know me and or working with one of our other groups. So we do have one more series coming up here. Well, actually there is, I think it's a supply chain, isn't it, after me today? I think it's supply chain at 1 o'clock today if you want to go with that. But on Friday, July 30th, we're going to be presenting occupational health at noon Eastern time, and then punch out at 1 p.m. Eastern time. And please email molly.velasco@bailedllc.com if you'd like to register for either of those. That's going to wrap up our July Informational Fridays. As well as we have this great free offering from Bales, okay? It's called Coffee with Consultants. So what this does is, it's really cool. We're going to give you 30 minutes. Come with a question, 30 minutes free consulting time that you can ask your questions, go through some scenarios of some items that might be happening. So just email Molly Velasco or register on our website, and we'll get you in touch with someone that's very proficient in that area. We have a phenomenal HCM team that will be able to help you with anything. And that's our presentation for today. Thank you all for your time of spending with us for our absence management overview.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Nikki. Thank you all for attending. Talk to you soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.